Hey, comic book guys and gals, it's Joe, and we're here for the live stream. We had to start at 9:15, so we didn't want to step on Reggie's toes. I knew that if I had a live stream going at the same time as Reggie, we'd probably get old people here. Nobody be watching Reggie. That wouldn't be fair. So we're starting at 9:15 today. So I do have a guest, but as a practical matter, I just want to give you. I want to do a couple of things first. Number one, I just want to thank everyone again that bought a mystery box. Some people threw in some extra money. This is the St. Jude's charity mystery box. So I've collected now with my doubling the first $600. I've collected $1,300. So on January 2nd, I'll be sending a check for $1,300 to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, which is so great. It's something I never imagined we'd be able to get it done and get it done so quickly. Hey, Tina, how you doing? Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining. So that's number one. Number two, I thought I'd do this as a live stream really quickly because I did get a great AOK from Chuck, who's going to be on in a minute. And I want to make sure that we acknowledge that when at the same time as I got the AOK in. But I just wanted to alert everybody that I am putting together a special pre-recorded video for my birthday, which is going to be on January 5th, 2022. I'm going to be traveling on that day. I was hoping to maybe do a live stream, but I can't do that because I'm going to be traveling on that day. But there's going to be a video. It's going to be a special video. I've been buying some special comic books as a gift to myself for my birthday. I'm going to be 71 years old. That's it, 71. Look, and I don't look a day over 70. Isn't that amazing? In any event, I am going to also have a giveaway, and I'm going to mention at that time how the giveaway is going to work. And the giveaway is going to be a Golden Age comics. You know why? Because I'm Golden Age Joe. That's right, 1951, baby. Golden Age. Golden Age. Let's see, we got a few more people who came in. Comic Bookworm, hey. Thanks a lot. All right. So as we go on forward, I just want to thank everybody for watching. If you're catching on the replay, thanks again. $1,300 going to St. Jude's Hospital and a special video on January 5th. So don't miss that one. That's important. All right. And we will have a giveaway on that video. So why the live stream? As I mentioned, we're down in North Carolina at Reggie's Garage Con. We met so many great people there, people that we only met in the chat and so forth. And one of the people that I met down there was Chuck. So let's get Chuck up here. Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Joe. It's nice to see you.
Well, thanks for joining me, but especially thanks for joining me because you sent me a great AOK. Now, you want to kind of set that up a little bit and we can talk about it and show the comic books?
Sure. So when we met in Raleigh, in Charlotte, you mentioned your channel that you had. And right. So when we came back, I popped over to take a look at it. And you had a video on Alien Worlds, right, which is a series I love.
Okay, hold on a second.
Sure.
Let me see. Let me see if I could bring it up here real quick. All right. All right. That was the part of the video that we talked about with Alien Worlds, right? All right. So go ahead.
And you were talking about how much you enjoyed the covers to it and how you were excited about picking up books with similar covers from similar artists.
Right.
And one of the, of course, cover artist for Alien Worlds was Dave Stevens. Mm-hmm. And I've been working on my collection of Dave Stevens covers slowly but surely. In fact, one of the books I bought at GarageCon was a 9/6 Johnny Quest, which had a Dave Stevens cover, which is just an awesome book.
So I didn't know much about Dave Stevens until I saw some of these covers here. Was his period of time, around the, was he in the 80s? Is that his period of time?
Yeah, he was late 70s, the 80s, and the early 90s. And, unfortunately, he passed away at a fairly young age. Mm. Most of your viewers will know him from creating The Rocketeer, right, which Disney eventually optioned and everything. But before then, he was known for his high quality art and his ability to sort of bounce between a more cartoony style and sort of a much more realistic style. And he was especially known for his good girl art and the incredible art he did with women. And he's actually credited with sort of reviving the career of Betty Page because he
Oh, was he a
based
Betty Page guy? He's the guy. He did the Betty
yeah,
Page stuff.
right. In fact, he used Betty Page as the model for the female love interest in Rocketeer. And so
Okay.
he's kind of credited with sort of revitalizing interest in Betty Page and
So
Betty Page's career.
one thing is this is my favorite Alien Worlds cover. Let me see if I get it. This is one that I really really loved. Really good. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. So,
Yeah.
so at that time, so it's interesting. Collectors are just now rediscovering Dave Stevens, but a lot of his work, which he did in the early '80s, were for some of these smaller independent companies,
Right.
like Pacific Comics, like Eclipse, and others. And so, when you mentioned you were interested in the Aliens Worlds, I remember that I had a Twisted Tales with Dave Stevens artwork, and
Right.
so
Okay. So I just got it today. That's why I set this thing up so quickly. So let's go ahead and show. And you sent me a really nice note. Hope you enjoyed the books. It was great to meet you in person at Charlotte. Of course, meeting me in person probably was the highlight of your entire Comic-Con experience. In any event, let's take a look. So here's the comic book. All right, let me see if I can make myself a little bigger here. Twisted Tales. There we go. Let me get the glare off.
Mhm.
So one thing that I noticed, I did go through this a little bit just to see what was in there. Very interesting storylines that were in this. I kind of enjoyed reading them actually. But the cover by Stevens, which is a really, how can I put this, delicious cover, I guess, has nothing to do with the stories inside, which I think it's kind of cool though, because I think that's fine. But it's a great cover, but not anything having to do with the story.
Yeah, it's and Stevens occasionally would do that with his covers where he'd kind of go off script a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's one where it's such a striking cover. And I mean, and let's face it, she looks like she walked out of an '80s music video.
She does. She does. And that fellow looks like, I grew up in the Village, right? And at that time with the Bottom Line and some of the other places down there, you had some people walking around that looked like this guy, So, and you had some girls that looked like this girl there. So, I think it kind of is from a period piece works for me. But this looks like he drew it in 1986. It says at the bottom there.
Yeah.
Right. And the comic book came out in 1987. So I found out when I was looking at this that, I'll put it right here. I found out that Twisted Tales was a Pacific Comics magazine picked up by Eclipse, just like some of the others that we talked about, just like Alien Worlds had been. And they think they had, 10, was it 10 issues, if I remember correctly? 8 issues.
Yeah.
8 issues, I think it was. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of those companies kind of bought back and forth between who owned them and who didn't. And, it looks like, for instance, Malibu wound up owning a bunch of those. They were all sort of under the Malibu imprint to a certain extent for a while, which is really interesting because they had a lot of other publishers that sort of went along with it. And of course, for most of us, we think of Malibu, we think of the brief moment where they auditioned Spawn, but they also had other imprints like Aerocol Comics, which is where Men in Black started, or Silverline, where you got Cat and Mouse, and so they or Shattered Earth, which had the original X Mutants. So lots of very different things there, which they sort of dipped their toes into.
Mm-hmm. So when I read through the books, just to tell some people some of the stories in there, the first one was called Termites from Mars. And it almost had nothing to do with, except at the end, the termites did show up, but I don't think they were from Mars, But it was the thing that interested me about that was it brought me back to like TV shows like Leave It to Beaver or something like that, with these guys and the high school guys, like thinking they're cool and doing all this type of stuff, and and just kind of being involved together, and eventually growing up, I guess, and what have you. But that was kind of an interesting story. Then the other one was Fraternity, and this was a bit. There was a lonely fat guy who used to daydream about meeting women and dating women, and then he ends up with this routine that seems to work for him, where he gets women to date him and to sleep with him, actually, by just these really horrific lies, where anytime you read something in the newspaper where someone dies and he sees a woman that he likes, he starts to cry and make believe that person was his son, his father, his relative, or something like that. And the women feel sorry for him, and take care of him. So it's kind of weird like that. And the last one was some guy who joins a yacht club and finds out that it becomes like Davy Jones's locker and stuff like that, So that was kind of interesting. That was kind of a short one. So those are the type of stories that you used to find on occasion in some of the old like Marvel books that they had and so forth, where you had these writers that they were not superhero writers back in the late 40s, early 50s and so forth. They had to come up with these stories, and they went from horror after the Comics Code came in more to science fiction. So this is almost like a throwback to the pre-code horror type of stuff. Not as gory, but kind of a throwback to that.
Yeah, I think it was really neat seeing how the independent publishers then were doing a lot of experimentation with the older style of genres, but still trying to work within the restrictions of the Comics Code.
Right.
And while Eclipse and Pacific could kind of go outside of the code a little bit, they were still kind of limited to a lot of the assumptions that even in the direct market,
right.
there was still a clearer line as to how far they could go as opposed to how far they couldn't go.
That's right. Until Marvel decided that they weren't going to follow anything anymore, and the whole thing collapsed, which I think probably is a good thing in some ways.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that book I think is a great book, and I really thank you for it. But I have to tell you, you threw in a couple of other books, and these two books really, really interested me. All right. Let me pull them up here. And they have black covers, and we'll discuss why, but I'm going to take one out. This is the book. And you see it says The Uncensored Mouse. Okay? Very, very interesting. I just flipped through it. I didn't read anything, but The Uncensored Mouse was, let's see, Mickey Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see here, it says, let me see if I get this without, complete and uncut, a classic collection of uncensored Floyd, can't read it off the line there.
Gotherson, I think is how you say it.
Comic strips from the 1930s. They don't say it's Mickey Mouse comic strips from the 1930s, right? And there are two volumes of it, Volume 1 and Volume 2. The only two that happened because they got sued. Probably,
So what? Okay. Sorry.
Go ahead. What about them?
So what happened there was the way copyright law was going on at the time. The Mouse, of course, had worked very hard to keep its copyright on Mickey in terms of all of his theatrical productions and everything. So Steamboat Willie and whatnot. What they had not kept up with, though, were the newspaper strips, which ran concurrently with the shows on TV. Because remember, at the time, newspaper strips are the main way people are consuming their comic creations. We forget today that Crazy Cat by William Herman, by George Herman, rather, excuse me. Little Nemo and Slumberland, Gasoline Alley were all major cultural hits. And even today, if you talk to a 20-something-year-old, they probably don't know that Annie came out of a comic strip with no eyes.
That's right.
Uh,
But it's a Broadway
so
play.
that's right. They just think it's a musical that's been around forever,
Right.
And we're not going to get into stuff like Little Abner, which is a whole different beast. So
Right.
Disney very intelligently marketed exactly Pretty Fly, yes, and right, and we don't even think about the Spider-Man strips that ran for a long time with Romita's art. So,
Mhm.
but Disney very intelligently said, okay, we're going to run our strips daily in the newspaper to promote our product and get our characters across. And so it ran for a long time in the newspapers. But when it came time to renew copyright, the people at Disney didn't think about the newspaper strips,
Right.
and so it went into public domain. And so what happened there was, I think it was Eternity Comics there, decided to reprint a bunch of these because they were now in the public domain.
Right. I think that
But
was
they
in
were
19. Right. I think these came out in 1989 by Malibu Graphics and Eternity Comics line. Yeah,
yeah,
that's what it says on this
and
thing.
as you said, they were terrified of getting sued, so they listed as uncensored mouse. Or
That's right.
they also put them in plastic bags so that you had to actually open the bags to read the books.
Oh, that I didn't know. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Mm.
and so they went to great lengths, and they only planned on doing 3 issues of this. So they got 2 out before Disney sent the letter of death to them. And
Yeah, and they don't say Mickey Mouse anywhere on that. They don't talk about it. They say it's Fred Gottfredson. What's his name? Gottfredson.
Gottfredson, yes.
Strips from the 1930s. You're right. It says here it was sold in a bag. I actually didn't read that before. So they couldn't flip through the book while they were in the store. They had to buy it. Interesting.
Right.
Interesting. And so these were comic strips from the 1930s. And what makes it, as I understand at the time, Disney did not want to associate themselves even with these comic strips. Although I think later on they may have said okay or what have you, changing mores and all that. But why was it that they did not want those strips even out there? They wanted nothing to do with them and they wanted to stop them, other than the copyright, obviously. But they had other reasons too, I believe.
So Disney was very much trying to sanitize is not the word I'm looking for, but really tried to family friendly its image in the late 80s and the early 90s. And if you read these strips, and you can, by the way, you can buy these strips. Fantagraphics actually has this Race to Death Valley collection on sale because Disney has now embraced their history completely. They decided there's more money to make in nostalgia selling to people who care about this, and they'll figure that the 8-year-olds won't know. So, but there is a lot of swearing. There's not necessarily swearing in there, but there are issues in there with language. There is, sort of a much more adult-ish context than you would normally be used to for what you would think of as a Walt Disney story. It's nothing bad, I don't think, but these are clearly aimed at adults. And there are racist caricatures that you're going to find in any works from the 1920s and the 1930s. And that's, and I'm Joe, I'm sure you've talked about, that's part of the problem some of us have collecting Golden Age stuff is we really want the Golden Age stuff. And then we look at some of it and go, I don't know if I want that in my collection or not. So,
yeah, some people are like that. I have to say though, Chuck, I'm not so much that way because nobody looks at a collection except for me. So I think what I do is I kind of try to find some comics that I'm interested in and just go with those. And most of the ones that I get, I mean, and I'm tipping my hand a little bit, but my birthday video on the 5th is going to be talking about some Golden Age comics like that. But basically a lot of them, if you go back to them, they had like, cowboys that were heroes. You had, spacemen that were saving the world and so forth. Some of them are a little sexy, some of them were a little sexy, which were the mores of the time. Some in today's mores, you could look at and say, yeah, that's kind of racially insensitive, I guess is a good way of putting it with respect to that, but things change. And So to me, it's just kind of part of the history that's there. I don't think it's something that they should do now. And I think people wouldn't accept it now. I wouldn't accept it now, but I can kind of see it, in terms of a historical perspective. This is how comic books were at the time. And that's just kind of the way people saw things, right or wrong, and I think most of the time probably it was wrong, but that's the way they saw things at the time. So it has a historical perspective for me, and that's kind of the way I look at it with respect to these things.
Well, and that's very much the way I look at it too. But I also teach history, so there, I will admit a slight bias there. But on the other hand, it does make for interesting discussions with the boss and the younger bosses. When you buy a book, like I just did recently, a Blackhawk book, and they look at all the Blackhawk characters, and there's the one little guy there in the multicolored outfit, and you go, "What's his name?" Well, his name's Chop Chop. Oh, really, Dad?
Right.
And you bought that? Why? Well, it's not why I bought the book. Okay,
Of
but
course not. Yeah.
right, and but we've had similar discussions in this house. I also love classic animation. And I tracked down once the top 50 cartoons supposedly of all time that were ranked by Jerry Beck. And if you look at that list, there's 3 on there that are never going to get shown on television ever again. In fact, Warner's doesn't even want to admit they made them. So go figure.
You go back even when I was a kid, Crazy Cat cartoons were always on. Betty Boop was always on. Even the really early ones, which were Betty Boop, were pretty sexual, I guess.
Yes.
And as a little kid, I didn't think about it really. It didn't. I just was a cartoon, So it's So when you take a look at it, then I think there's some value in knowing what it was and how things were done in that time. Even though today, you just wouldn't do something like that. Which I think in many ways is better. It's a better situation for us to be in with respect to kind of the entertainment area. Movies probably the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. HBO Max has the original Fleischer Popeyes on there. And there's a lot of stuff in there that I'm, as someone who likes the history of animation, I'm very pleased to see. On the other hand, there are a few things that, I kind of raised an eyebrow and went, wow, I'm surprised they're showing that. But I guess they figure that nobody's looking for classic Popeye. So, they're not too worried about that.
So Chuck, you live in North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up in New York City because you mentioned Popeye. So every night at 6, when I grew up, the news was a half hour long at night, believe it or not. They had 15 minutes of local news and then 15 minutes of national news until they got to Walter Cronkite, and then they expanded it to half an hour. So at 6 o'clock every night on a local channel, Channel 11, a guy came on TV with a captain, a sailor's captain get up on to do the Popeye show. And he'd show 4 or 5 Popeye cartoons. And they were all the cartoons. And again, I watched them every night. That's just the way things were with respect to that. So, I just think that from our standpoint, with comic books, you take a look at something, something like this. And to me, I was very interested in it because I just thought, oh boy, I didn't know anything about this. From an historical perspective, it's interesting. And when I read through some of the cartoons, I can understand why people feel, kind of queasy about some of it right now. But you know what? It was in 1930, or the 30s, that was the deal. And I'm glad that I know about it now and that I have some evidence of what things were about. If for no other reason, they always say that, if you don't study history, you're bound to repeat it. I don't know if I'm saying that the right way. But so yeah, we know about that. We know that probably is not the best thing to do right now. But we have an example perhaps of what to consider when doing something and saying maybe this is not the right way of going. We have to go a different way. So that's kind of the way I, if people ask me things and, bring up stuff and saying, why do you do something? Why do you do this? I always bring that up. I say, it's learning. It's learning. You can't bury it, you shouldn't, but you don't embrace it.
Right. And to Disney's credit, I think they've embraced this stuff as they found that there's more profit, I think, to be made off of the nostalgia side and the history side, and that that people are much more interested.
That's true. That's true. Pretty.
The rural electrification group still hadn't quite gotten that far yet. There, Fly. But yeah, I think in many ways, it's nice to see Disney and a lot of these companies re-embracing it and giving that caveat. Leonard Maltin always talked about that with a lot of the classic movies and stuff. And I think it's Whoopi Goldberg actually maybe who does who helped go out and promote for Disney Plus a lot of their older stuff, and saying yeah, I grew up with this stuff, and there's still intrinsic artistic value to it. Even if we might give things we might not be too sure about some things. So
yeah, artistic and historic value, in many ways. So I'm not a big, unless something is really awful, I'm not a big believer of saying it, let's sweep it under the rug. I just think it's important to put it in its place in the cubby hole and understand what it is, and then we're okay with respect to that. So anyway, just to recap, I got some great comic books from Chuck. Let me get these out here. The first one was Twisted Tales from 1987. All right. And then two books, The Uncensored Mouse, number 1 and number 2, right? Where, without the permission of Disney, some people at forgot the name of the company now, Eternity Comics published some Mickey Mouse comic strips, newspaper comic strips from the 1930s, which are a little bit iffy. You wouldn't publish them today. So from an historical perspective, I think it's really a great book to have. Of course, as Chuck said, they were going to have 3 issues, but they got sued by Disney, so then they came out with 2. So that's pretty good. All right, well, that's great. So there is one thing that I did want to bring up that was not originally on the agenda, because I got something in the mail today that I wanted to open up and to show people and not wait for an espresso mail call to do it. But I thought I'd set it up a little bit, So, and I don't know, Chuck, if you do any of this or are aware of it, but when I was growing up, paperback books that I first started to buy as a kid were 45 cents. And then they became 50 cents. Almost at the same time, I think the comic books went from 10 cents to 12 cents. So it was really tough for us guys back then, So with respect to that, one thing, my best buddy, John, became and I got to find out if he has any of those books left, but he became a big reader of Conan the Barbarian in paperback, Robert Howard's paperbacks that were reprints from the 1930s type of stuff. I, on the other hand, went the way of Doc Savage. And so I went down into the famous basement. Now, these were not surprises like those comic books. I knew these were down there somewhere, but I managed to dig out the paperback books that I bought as a kid for Doc Savage. So this was the first one, number 1. Who is Doc Savage? The Man of Bronze. Very cool. And a lot of the covers were taken from the old from the old books that came out with that. This was number 2, The Thousand-Headed Man. Number 3, Meteor Menace. And so on. I'll just show them real quickly. Fear K. Quest for Qui. The Fantastic Island. Murder Melody. Pirate of the Pacific. The Other World. And The Annihilist. And at the back, There was explained who was Doc Savage. And they gave you a little explanation of who he was and something about the story. So these are really cool. Matter of fact, if I had some time, I think I'd like to read through them again. So I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10 of them, but I think they were up into the hundreds at some point in time. All right. So putting that there, I got this in the mail. And I understand that Chuck has one too. Doc Savage magazine, number 6. Now, I got this. I started looking for these because I was at the New York Comic Con and saw Doc Savage magazine number 1 for an inordinate amount of money. So I was looking, I said, oh man, should I buy this thing? I said, oh, it's just a lot of money. I don't even know if it's worth that money, you know? So I didn't pull the trigger on that. But then I started looking for some others and I picked this one up here. So I'm kind of interested. I want to actually read through this one. $1. Not even sure what the year is on this because I just opened it up. I don't know if you know.
Probably
Chuck.
about 75, I would think. 74,
like
75.
75?
Yeah, that's about the time Marvel was doing those magazine size.
Right. So I have a bunch of Doc Savage comic books, and it's one that I've been toying with potentially. I know there's a DC series, there's Marvel series, potentially maybe going ahead and seeing if I could do a run on those type of things. But I'll do a video on that if I decide to do it. So this was pretty cool, I thought. And Doc Savage was the first Batman, huh? Actually, I think he was the first Superman.
Yeah.
Superman was based a lot on him.
Yeah, he's considered one of the grandfather pulp characters. You know, he's one of those great characters in American culture who was so popular for a long time, kind of like Felix the Cat. And we've sort of forgotten about him today. If you're looking for those Doc Savages, there is a giant-sized Spider-Man. I think it was issue 3, but I'm not positive, where he crosses over with Doc Savage while Marvel still had the copyright and they were trying to promote their Doc Savage line.
Right. I have a bunch of them downstairs, all different ones. I have to go through my boxes because I'm not as organized. I'm somewhat organized, but not as organized as I like to be. So I'm going to go through those and try to find them. And if I get something good together, we'll do a video on them. But so I got this. I definitely wanted to show that. But a couple of other things I just wanted to bring out since I was down there. I found a couple of other books that I thought were kind of cool here. These were some Batman books. So this one, Batman, it came out in, let's see, was it 66? Because you had the whole heyday of, the Batman 66 going on. But what it did was, in a book in black and white, it collected some comic books from Batman. Now, this is actually in pretty good shape here. I don't want to break the spine. It's in such good shape. It does say created by Bob Kane. It doesn't say Bill Finger. But here you go, you take a look at it. Let's see, it's got kind of the original Batman there, So I believe it's the first story you can see here. Young Bruce Wayne saying his parents are dead and so forth. So I thought this was pretty cool. And as a kid, it was great because I got to look at some very early Batman. The other one that I found was an original Batman novel based on Batman 66. All right. It's called 3 Villains of Doom. Batman battles the Penguin, Catwoman, and the Joker. And this actually was a novel. No pictures. You can see on the back. Kerpow, wham, and zowie. That's all you got to see. So these are pretty good. I don't know if anybody in the chat has any of these, but they were pretty cool. Let's see. We got here. Let's see. Sweet Batman books. I agree. I need to look for my old Choose Your Adventure Batman books. Oh, that's kind of cool. Psychedelic Comics. I have some of those mad paperbacks. I just didn't pull them up. I saw them downstairs. So that was pretty cool.
I was going to say that those Mad paperbacks are part of what got me into Mad magazines. For my dad showed me his collection of them because we had a bunch of those collections of like the best of what was the artist Don?
Oh yeah. And Spy versus Spy. Yeah.
Right. We had the Spy versus Spy. We had all the Don Newton's not his last name, whatever his name was.
Right.
All of his stories and their TV parodies and stuff like that. So
yeah. So and finally, then I'll let you guys go. Anybody, anybody in the chat know who Gardner Fox was? Chuck knows who Gardner Fox was. All right. So Gardner Fox was one of the preeminent writers, both during the Golden Age and then into the Silver Age. As a matter of fact, the one comic book that I've shown a few times on my channel, excuse me, Flash of Two Worlds, was written by Gardner Fox. And if you read through the story with Flash Barry Allen from Earth 1 encountering Flash Jay Garrett of Earth 2, at the end, what Flash Barry Allen realizes is that he was reading comic books about Jay Garrett, and the end result is that they felt that Gardner Fox was dreaming this thing up because he had some sort of psychic connection with Earth 2. So Gardner Fox was a big deal. And what you may not know is that Gardner Fox also wrote some 40-cent paperbacks. So this one, Warrior of Larn, basically is a play on John Carter, right? Warrior of Mars. And the second one in the series was Thief of Larn. The guy's name was Alan Morgan. He was an Earthman. He was a swordsman, an adventurer extraordinaire, I think is the way he was described by Gardner Fox. And he ends up at this planet Larn, a distant world with a red star. So Superman couldn't go and save him. So Gardner Fox, and and I was talking to Chuck earlier, and I think nowadays if you have somebody who writes comic books, they can go to like an Image or an independent, assuming their contract, they don't have an exclusive contract with one of the companies, and can come up with his ideas and make new comics out of it. I mean, these could have been comics, but Gardner Fox didn't have that option. So he ended up writing these books. And I don't know if there are any more than these two, but these are the two that I bought when I was a kid, 40 cents each.
Of course, Joe, he might have made more money writing those novels than he ever made for comics, depending on how well those sold.
Could be,
because those 40-cent novels. I mean, we were talking beforehand. My dad had a ton of those in his library when he passed away, and I mean, they were cheap, easy, disposable reading.
Right.
Nobody had portable phones and whatnot, so that was a good thing to read if you were in town and you were commuting to work and stuff. So,
right. And for me, I mean, you said you commuted to work and all that, but one of the things that I used to do is I was in the regimental band in high school. So I used to hop in the car and drive for hours to go to football games and things like that. And I used to be reading these type of books and James Bond books. Those are the two books I used to read all the time. But I happened to hold on to these for some reason, but they were in a box that I had downstairs with some other paperbacks, which I might pull out at some point in time, because there were some interesting paperbacks that came out at that time. And some of them were paperbacks of earlier novels, like from the 30s and 40s as well. And when you read some of them, you take a look at them, you say, well, these could have been great comic books, And so, we might take a look at them in the future anyway. So, Chuck, any last words before we turn this one off?
I'm you enjoy the books, and it's great to be on Talking Comics with you, and I hope you have a restful and enjoyable New Year's along with everyone in the chat. So,
same here, Chuck, for you and your family, your wonderful wife and your daughter, who I met down at GarageCon as well. So for everybody else here, again, thank you. $1,300 going to St. Jude's Research Hospital for Children. Getting it ready. It's going to go out on January 2nd. So they'll be getting that money. I'm sure they're going to be happy with that. Another thing, there is going to be, although I'm taking a couple of weeks off, the next regular video will be on I think the 17th is a Monday for the following New Comic Book Day. But on January 5th, I'm going to probably record it tomorrow. I'm going to have a recorded video to celebrate my 71st birthday, January 5th, 1951. Thank you. A great year. I am golden age personified, people. And so I've been buying some comic books that I think you guys would be interested in seeing, and I'm going to show them off on that video. And I'm going to tell you how you could win one of those comic books as well. So you may want to tune in. Again, January 5th. It'll probably go up in the morning, as some of my others do. So that's it. Thank you to everyone who was watching, everybody who commented. Thank you for happy birthdays in advance. Appreciate it. And we'll see you after the new year. Take care. And Chuck, thank you so much for hanging out with me for a bit.
Good to be here. Take care.
All right. Take care, guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.